Hi, so I wanted to walk you through a comparative advantage problem. I think that these can be a little bit more difficult for students and they tend to struggle a little bit more with them. So I wanted to walk you through the steps that I take and the stuff that I go through to answer these questions when I see them. Now, we're going to go through kind of the full problem, and you might not need all the components, but you'll at least see a problem from start to finish so you know where to go. So the 3 steps that I like to take are, I like to compare the costs, then we determine who has the comparative advantage, and then we figure out the terms of trade. Now here is an example where we have Marketopia and Econlandia, and they're just 2 different countries and they make cookies and pies. So the first step is we are going to determine the costs. So I'm going to use Marketopia to start off with. So how this works is that they can either make 0 cookies and 18 pies, they can make 10 cookies, 12 pies, and so on and so forth. So Marketopia cannot make 30 cookies and 18 pies because they do not have the available resources to do that. So in order for Marketopia to get 10 more cookies, so to go from 0 to 10 or to 20 or to 30, so to get 10 cookies, what they must give up are 6 pies. They must give up 6 pies. So in each of those cases, if Marketopia wanted 10 more cookies, they had to forego or give up 6 pies. Now in Marketopia, that means that one cookie equals 6/10 of a pie, which can be simplified to 3/5 of a pie. So what that's saying is that for every cookie Marketopia wants to produce, they must give up 3/5 of a pie. Now on the flip side, the opportunity cost, the comparative advantage or opportunity cost of a pie is going to be the reciprocal of that. So 1 pie, so I'm going to write it over here. 1 pie is going to be 5/3 of a cookie. So in order for Marketopia to go kind of the opposite way, to get 1 more pie, they must give up 5/3 of a cookie. Now on the other side where we have Econlandia, we'll give an E for them. What they are doing is that they're going to make 30 more cookies. So their cost of 30 cookies in Econlandia is that every time they do that, they have to give up 3 pies. Now for Econlandia, that means 1 cookie equals 1/10 of a pie, right? And 1 pie equals 10 cookies. So now what we have to do is we have to determine, so that was step 1. So we compared the cost, we just looked at what the opportunity cost, what the places had to give up in order to produce their respective cookies and pies. So now we need to determine who has the comparative advantage. And comparative advantage is who gives up less. So who has the lower opportunity cost. So let's compare cookies here. Let's compare Marketopia and Econlandia with cookies. Well, to make 1 cookie, Marketopia has to give up 3/5 of a pie, while Econlandia only has to give up 1/10 of a pie. So Econlandia has the comparative advantage in cookies. Now the idea of comparative advantage is that comparatively, so compared to the other person or the other country, what can you produce at a lower opportunity cost? So no country or no person can have the comparative advantage in both products. But let's just make sure that that checks out. So let's look at the pies. And it's pretty clear that Marketopia is giving up fewer pies. So Marketopia has the comparative advantage in pies. So what that's going to say is that Marketopia is going to spend all their time making pies and none of their time making cookies. And Econlandia is going to spend all their time making cookies and none of their time making pies, because they have the comparative advantage in their respective baked good. But you know what? So that was step 2 to determine who has the comparative advantage. Now the last one is the terms of trade. Marketopia may produce pies, but I bet they like to eat cookies. And same thing with Econlandia, they make cookies, but I bet they like to eat pies. So what we have here is that we're going to need to trade. So Marketopia is willing to trade a pie for cookies. And the lowest they'd be willing to trade a pie for is the cost the cost for them to produce a pie. So the lowest that they would produce, the lowest they would sell a pie for would be 5/3 of a cookie. Because anything less than that, and it wouldn't be worth their time. This would be like having a lemonade stand where it costs you $2 a cup to make your lemonade. You wouldn't want to sell it for less than $2 because you would lose out on the deal. But you know what? Econlandia, they're only willing to sell their cookies, to trade their cookies for so much too. And they're only willing to trade their cookies up to 10 cookies. So somewhere between there is an acceptable terms of trade. So we bound the terms of trade, we bound that trading range between the two opportunity costs. And we can do the same thing for cookies. So Econlandia is producing cookies. The lowest they'd be willing to sell a cookie for is 1/10 of a pie. Because again, anything less than that they would be losing out. In Marketopia, all that they would be willing to pay for a pie is they wouldn't be able to go more than 3/5 of a pie because it wouldn't be worthwhile for them either. And so right here are the terms of trade bound between the two opportunity costs. And so that's the steps that you need to take to work on these comparative advantage problems. They can be really tough for some students, so my best suggestion is that you practice and you continue to practice them until you start answering the questions correctly. Thanks.